Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the regular Committee of the Whole meeting of Wednesday, April 12th. My name is Ian Morrison. I'm the Electoral Area Director for Cowichan Lake South Scots Falls. I'll be chairing this meeting today. I'd like to thank Director Martman for his First Nations acknowledgement of the meetings here today. And we'll proceed to ask Amanda what our first order of business is today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your first order of business is the approval of the agenda.
Moved by Director Stone, seconded by Director Martman. Any discussions, additions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is the adoption of the minutes. And M1 is the Committee of the Whole meeting minutes of March 22nd. So you'll be adopting those today.
Any errors or omissions? Moved acceptance. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next item is business arising from the minutes. Don't see any. Then we have public input period.
I'd like to invite anyone in the gallery today or online, if we have any registered, to provide input to the committee on items that will be discussed on today's agenda. So now would be your opportunity. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and board members. My name is Susan Kaufman and I live in Salem. I wish to speak to R1, the fireworks discharge topic. And I'm concerned that there's an effort being made to sever the CVRD from the municipalities. I've been present for a lot of the discussions on the fireworks bylaw, and my impression was that we were trying to get a cohesive document that would apply to all the member municipalities and the CVRD, because we are each other's neighbors. So it is disappointing that I didn't see that. And part of the reason it would seem that the enforcement part is part of the problem, is the costing and how would you effectively police it with a regional document. So I just would like the members to consider that when they are making their deliberations today. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Is there anyone else who would like to provide input to the committee prior to the onset of our deliberations of these items? No one online? Next item, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 5 is delegations. We have one delegation today. We have Nancy Hamilton and Jenny Horn from Vancouver Island University.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jesse Chalmers, and I'm the campus administrator for Vancouver Island University, Cowichan campus. I'm here to support the team that we have to present to you today on our agriculture initiatives, and hopefully we'll be able to answer any kind of overarching institutional questions that you may have, just where we're coming from support from VIU for this. So to start with, I'd like to introduce Jenny Horn. She's our agriculture education consultant for VIU that's been working with us for the last number of years, and also has a long history of working with VIU in this capacity over many, many years. So I'll turn it over to Jenny.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pleased to see everybody here today, and thank you for providing us the opportunity to address you today. I'd like to start off by bringing you in to the first slide. I'm not sure who's in charge of slides. Am I? No? Oh, it says, please do not touch. Okay, so I will touch. There we go. So the first slide is a summary of you, just to have a look at how we align the Ministry of Agriculture initiative that's current and what it is that the CVRD has expressed in their strategic planning. So the Ministry of Agriculture has most recently come out with a new mandate which focuses on regenerative agriculture, agri-technology, and also support for the local food hub program, which they've initiated. The regenerative agriculture really is a return to a more traditional way of looking at agriculture as more integrated systems, and it looks at much more sustainable, ecological, and importantly for you folks, climate adaptive practices in agriculture. And that ties nicely in with the Cowichan Valley Regional District regional plans. If you look at some of the statements here from your strategic planning and think about agriculture businesses as you look at those statements. So in terms of looking at green growth and sustainable development, we are interested in supporting the adaptability of agriculture businesses and industry to change with the climate and to become more adaptive so that they can continue to survive and hopefully thrive in the future. We're also looking particularly at your climate adaptation strategy as well, and looking at wanting to work together with you to raise awareness, build knowledge, build skills and resources within the agriculture community itself, within the business community, but also within bodies such as yourselves within government and decision-making bodies, so that you can understand what the challenges are, what the adaptive practices would be, and how we can move together towards a more climate adaptive future. Oh, sorry, so they can see, sorry. And then finally, I noted that you had some cross-cutting actions that you had identified, and I think this program is a really good example of how intersectoral groups can come together. So the education community, the agricultural community, the economic development community can come together to work together to look at how we are going to move our agriculture sector forward in the Cowichan Valley, but in that more regenerative way of developing agriculture, and also with that climate adaptive component. Specifically at Vancouver Island University Cowichan campus, we've been doing a lot of work over the decades and more recently since COVID in the last couple of years to really look at adopting more of an agricultural extension model. It's a model which is still very prevalent in the States, and we'd like to revive it in Canada. As a matter of fact, British Columbia is now going to be the lead province in reviving agricultural extension services across Canada. And essentially it's a triad of communication, networking, and support between academic communities with their research components, the ministry and those involved in sector development, and those who are practitioners in the sector. So the food producers and the food processors, working with the economic development officers, working with the academics, bringing the latest of research and bringing it together in a way that is accessible to folks who are already engaged in the industry and who may or may not be available to relocate to some of our excellent agriculture degree programs at UBC and Kwantlen Polytech. It's not always suitable for our practicing farmers on the island and in the Cowichan Valley to access the education opportunities that are going on there. So we would really like to develop those opportunities here in the Cowichan Valley. And in particular, we're going to focus on small-scale agriculture production, craft food and beverage processing, and enterprise development for those sectors. In order to do this, we are seeking support from yourself as well as some other community partners and funders to support an ongoing coordination role to keep this portfolio rolling along. You can imagine we're in a cost recovery department at the university, and Nancy will tell you a bit more about that in a moment. But when we do apply for funding, the funding actually is often very well scripted and very well prescribed to deliver that particular funded proposed project. What we're looking for is to find ways to support a coordinator to fill those spaces in between those funded activities. So, for instance, it would be be in looking at establishing and maintaining networks. So it's pulling together advisory committees, making sure that we're well tuned to what's going on in the community. It's seeking and securing funding opportunities, things like writing the grant. You cannot recover the cost of writing the grant in the grant itself. Once the grant is funded, then you move forward with the delivery of that grant, but the actual networking and the communications, the collaborations, the false starts, because sometimes you write the grant and you don't get the grant. So there's activities that require professional services and coordination over a long period of time to keep the portfolio moving along. That's what we're looking for support for today. With that, as I said, with most of the grants, we don't get that coordination money for the in-between spaces. And so that's why we've come forward to talk to you today about contributing $8,500 from the Economic Development Fund, I believe, to be able to help us support that coordinator's position. Nancy's going to tell you a little bit more now about how that professional development training division works and why it is that we operate in a cost recovery environment within a university system.
Welcome, Nancy.
So with our cost recovery department, it's called currently professional development training. In the past, it was called continuing education. The primary focus of our department is networking out in community. So taking a look and working with like our economic development teams, our industry partners, our communities, our First Nation groups, and then building the curriculum and the needs that is local, like labor market driven and industry driven. And currently what we're doing with the agriculture portfolio is try to create that sustainability around it. We've been working on this for a number of years, as Jenny had told you. And what we're looking at right now is building out a series of 6 micro-credentials that we're doing that are going to be delivered out into our community, but also shared across BC. And so we've been applying for funding to get these curriculum pieces done. And we work with an organization which is called CETA BC, which is the Continuing Education Association of BC, of which we, VIU, is one of the members. Our institution is the lead for the agriculture portfolio in BC to move this forward. So our area, we get the benefit of moving these curriculum development forward. And that's how Jenny is networked with us building this right now. We've got 3 of our courses that we have applied for funding. We just got notification from the ministry that we will have funding to do the SEEDS curriculum piece. So we'll be moving forward with that, but we're still missing that overarching, that program coordinator role that's in between it. All of us sort of put this off the side of our desk to try and pull together, keep this going forward because it's needed within the community. And so that's why we're coming forward here asking, like in each one of the proposals now, I'm trying to tuck in a piece of request to have that ongoing so that our community has like an agriculture program coordinator to bring these stories forward. That's what we're doing. Micro-credentials, some people are asking, the buzz around what is micro-credential, and a micro-credential is the way to recognize shorter-term competency-based training initiatives. And it's not new, like it's different in how it's being recognized within our provincial government, also within our institutions. Each of these courses that we develop, every institution is taking a look at what is their mandate around micro-credentials. Are they giving credit to it? But what it does is they can take each of these 6 courses we're doing, they can either what they call stack them or ladder them, and then they'll be recognized in institutions, also can go to other institutions and other areas. So our micro-credentials for the agriculture sector, some of those participants may only take 3 of them, but they may want to do something with forestry, or they may want to do something in manufacturing. So it's more portable, and it's driven by the local economy, by our industry partners as well. A lot of our work is all around collaboration. It's staying in touch with our community partners and what we're doing and build that local knowledge that we're building here. Thank you.
That concludes your remarks. Excellent. So I'm sure we'll have some questions from committee members, but just on a process and layout, how we normally do our best practices, we will, we don't generally respond to a delegation with a request like this the day of. We will likely ask our staff to provide us with a report if someone around the table would like to make a motion to that effect. But before we go there, I'll go to questions for the delegation. And I'll recognize, I think Director Stone got in, or were you looking at a motion?
I was looking at a motion.
Okay, so I'll go to Director Wilson, Douglas, and Martman. Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that. That's great stuff. And as we discussed outside there, being the world's worst student, I'm a great believer in education, especially continuing education. And this to me, as far as the funding is concerned, I'm sure Director Stone is going to make the motion. I'll say yes to that. It's not a big deal. But one of the things that worries me a lot is there was a report on the news this morning about the loss of farming personnel, farming families. And this is a big thing because it's all very well having all these educational things in place. But if we don't have the families or the personnel to run them, or even the places for them to live on site to work, then we have more of a problem than anything. Is there anything in this program that could perhaps address some of those problems and try and get the personnel and or the buildings back in to actually get the workers back onto the sites again? Thank you.
There's a few pieces. One I can speak to. A few areas. One I can speak to is the government has what's called the Community Workforce Response Grants, and we are partnering with North Island College to put in an application forward on this grant. And what that does would help bring 12 people to our area to help do training on the identified farms that are needing the support, as well as getting their training in the credentials that we're moving forward on it. And Jenny can speak further on the farming community that she's networking to get that placement of the individuals.
Yeah, we have a partnership in development with North Island College to do some actual, what I would call more the applied training component. So this regenerative farming practices course that we're hoping to be funded, we're pretty sure we'll get funded for this summer with North Island, would be an applied program. So it's actually putting hands in the dirt and teaching people the what of farming. The micro-credentials are intended to bring a little bit more of the why, so that it's a little bit more in the theoretical, hoping to mobilize some of that science-based knowledge, which if you were not raised on a family farm, or you were not able to go and attend UBC or Fraser Valley or even Guelph, the sciences behind the practices. So we're really looking at sort of addressing it from two areas. Some of our funders want to know that we're developing a labor force market, and definitely we need to develop a labor force market for agriculture, and particularly on Vancouver Island, because we have so many different sectors that you need a labor force that's very agile to move. It's blueberry season, and then next thing you know, we're picking grapes, and then we have to get ready because we need to plant the asparagus. So because we have these very wide range of commodities, it's very beneficial to the farms to have people very flexible to move across those different seasonal activities. And then the micro-credential program is really looking at grooming more towards people making management decisions. So we're focusing on the principles, which then inform the practice, which then would hopefully inform folks that could then move either into management positions or could then take that management decision-making model back into their own practices. So it's a bit about trying to support the family farm to continue by building up that capacity in the family farm, but also having a well-informed and enthusiastic labor force as well.
Well, if I could, Mr. Chair, very quickly. And this leads on to obviously having the accommodation for those workers. And will you be speaking with the ALR to see if there can be any relaxation on some of the quite stringent restrictions they have on building something to house these folks?
Housing is definitely an issue. It's specifically when you look at the family farm and the number of family members who can be housed on a farm. So that's very much an ALR consideration at the moment. Farm labor is not so much an issue in terms of meeting ALR requirements. You can house your labor on the farm. You just can't have 3 generations in 3 different houses on the farm. So that is a consideration. And I know that the ALR I know that at a national level, that's being addressed at the moment, or is definitely under discussion, and I think that's going to have some weight and put some impact on the ALR to address that as well. Definitely an ongoing consideration, yeah.
Director Douglas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. To Dr. Horn and Ms. Hamilton, Municipality of North Cowichan, we're reestablishing our Agricultural Advisory Committee, which has been dormant for a number of years, and its first big task is going to be updating our strategic agricultural plan, which is now more than 20 years old. We're going to be looking to coordinate this, obviously, with the Economic Development Office here at the CVRD, but also hoping you folks can be involved in those discussions as well, because we'd love to get your input. And Director Justice here, also on North Cowichan Council, will be chairing the committee, so he'd be the primary point of contact on that.
Excellent, yeah. And that's a primary example of where these unfunded spaces are in this role. It's very difficult to find funding in a grant, competitive grant environment to fund those kinds of really essential developmental roles and developmental conversations. So I think that the inclusion of your local academic institution is an excellent inclusion. And we need you folks too to make sure that we're connecting with what the needs are that you're identifying. For instance, water management. And let's start with that in North Cowichan. So what can we do to help promote a better understanding of water management principles and practices? We would very much welcome that engagement. And that's, as I said, it's an excellent example of how do you fund that activity. So this is why we're here asking today for your support for $8,500 to help support a part-time coordinator, with the vision that as we build this portfolio, we will then be able to wean that position into being self-sufficient. So thank you very much for that invitation, and I'm really looking forward to working with Christopher on that.
And thank you for that gentle reminder about the principal focus of why we're here today. And I'm just going to take a quick reset housekeeping moment to remind all the directors around the table, 4 to 6 inches from your mic is a desired distance so that everyone who's listening at home can hear. And if I could get the delegation to please just angle the mic and stand in front of the computer so that we're not just seeing a hand or a shoulder. There we go. And with that, I'd like to go to Director Martman.
Thank you. And so my area is up in Yellow Point and the Diamond North Oyster, and I've been involved with the Farmers Institute, which is a Cedar Nanaimo Farmers Institute in the past. And so my first question is, how do we get so lucky here? And the reason I ask that is because the Farmers Institute branches over both the CVRD and the Regional District of Nanaimo. So this asks us coming to the CVRD. So why not Nanaimo? Why not Comox as well? Because VIU.
They're next in line.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You're our practice round.
Okay, all right.
Close to home.
So it's so good, thanks, because they are looking at the CVRD, at least from their perspective, as that there's a lot of things happening here, and certainly agriculture is very important. The next question is young agrarians, and where do they fit into this whole picture?
Okay, thank you very much. So the Young Agrarians is a nonprofit organization that is at a federal level. They tend to focus on engaging with emerging and existing agrologists and agriculturalists who are sort of, I would guess, anywhere from 12 or 10 years old to up to about 30. So the young agrarian is very much sort of focused on doing things that are a little bit more maybe hip and happening and sort of a little more, a little bit more upbeat and they have a lot of that activity in the slow food movement, and they do some fun things like they do slow food discos, and everyone makes soup together and they out of their scrap food and things. So they try to do a lot more sort of engaging to get that youth and get those young agrarians interested in what they're doing. They do quite a bit of advocacy work. They do a lot of work in looking at helping to move policy forward, and they do some program delivery. So at the moment, we're working with them through our partnership with North Island College, because when we're funded, not if, but when we're funded for the regenerative practices program that we're going to offer this summer, we would be working with the Young Agrarian Coordinator on Vancouver Island to match up some of their folks with the program, but also the Young Agrarians have already a fairly well-scripted mentoring program, which is in place in Alberta and in Saskatchewan, and they're really interested in really invigorating that mentoring apprenticeship kind of program here in British Columbia. So this would be one of the first ways that we would start to work together with Young Agrarians to help them invigorate that on Vancouver Island, is we would work with them through that funded program. We will have 12 students who would do a series of theoretical and classroom-based learning. Then we would take them onto a farm collectively and do some training on a farm, and then they would pair off and do a 2-month placement on one of our regional farms in the Cowichan Valley, and that's where we would link in with the agrarians, the young agrarians, and we would use some of their resources in that mentoring program to help support the project that we're doing. And in that way, that would enable them to get their feet wet and kind of start to develop that mentoring apprenticeship program that they have in place already in other provinces.
Thank you for that. I just note that we have Director Staples, Abbott to close, and then I'll go to Director Stone. Director Staples.
Thank you for your presentation. It's lovely to see all three of you again. Welcome home, Jenny. I just wanted to, I guess, there's a couple of things that really stood out to me about this. One is this morning it was just announced that in 10 years from now, we're going to lose 40% of our farmers in Canada. So I think that this can't come at a better time. Particularly when you talked around that land connection and really getting into the dirt and encouraging people, why would you want to do this? Yep. The second piece, being a farmer in my past life and knowing the challenges of housing on farms, there has to be significant change in how to allocate a certain percentage of the land for housing for families and also for labor and for other people. Because I think that's the only way we're going to be able to actually transition into, a more food secure future, is if we actually have the ability to have, sort of whatever the percentage of the land is that the federal government comes up with that is allocated to building. Because you cannot exist. You can't work full-time, farm full-time, and not kill yourself for something that is so vitally important to the existence of all of us. Yeah. And so I really am grateful for the work that you're doing, very supportive of it, and also, anything around the advocacy for the need to change some of those laws so that they still protect the land, but also provide the stability to keep farming going.
And again, that's why it's important for regional districts, North Cowichan councils, city councils, to have that direct line into the agriculture communities so that you can understand what those issues are and do the advocacy as well, because that policy change really does, it takes a lot of vocalization to get things to shift. But I think that environment is very much changing now. And just to your point, clarification for those in the room who don't know what she means by we're going to lose all our farmers, it's not because they're quitting. It's because the average age of a farmer in Canada is 65, and I think in British Columbia it might even be 67. So it's a matter of aging out. We're losing our intellectual property, like that stock of knowledge. And it's not just about reading in a book about how to farm. It's about knowing the lay of that land, knowing the way the climate is, how the water moves over that part of the valley. There's a lot to be that you learn by osmosis, by just being in the industry and doing it. So it's very, very important. And that's also happening in the fisher industry as well, I'll say. So it's our food production capacity is very much in danger of losing that enormous stock of knowledge and practical knowledge too. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for adding that clarification.
Director Abbott to close.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Professors Horn and Hamilton. Very timely, as been emphasized this morning, timely topic. Director Martman raised the question I wanted to ask, but there was a corollary. Will you be coming back every year looking for support from these various bodies? And more power to you. This is your practice run. You've done marvelously this morning. I think you'll do well. But 8,500, as we know, does not cover a person.
Yeah. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. As we build up the project, like for the whole agriculture division within VIU, but also in our community, we will be reaching out till we hit that sustainability point. Like right now, between Jenny and I, we're doing grant applications all over the place, bringing in the little pieces that we can. So it will be a number of years before we can actually flip it over and say, hey, this position can exist now with all the programming that we're doing.
Do you want to speak to that, Jesse?
Yeah. I'll maybe just add in a little bit to that. So this is one part of the agriculture conversation that's happening at VIU right now. So we are exploring opportunities around academic programming to certificates, degrees, diplomas as well. Very early stages of that, but this really, we're looking at it holistically, so this will fit in and tie in with that, so we're hoping that we'll be able to create some sustainable funding for this position moving forward. And also, maybe I'll speak to an earlier comment too, why Cowichan Valley? Part of it is, so VIU's strategic plan, it's about meeting the needs of community and community. And so with our regional campus here, we're looking at what are the needs of this region. And in all the regions that VIU serves, we're advocating that it makes most sense that as we're dipping our toes into the agriculture conversation, that this is where it should be housed within VIU. So, so yeah, it is an intentional choice that we're starting here. Yeah.
Thanks for stepping up and providing that, because our motion author stepped out of the room there for a second. I was going to have to delay. But just in advance of that, could I ask so that we can get the business moving forward, timeline on needing an answer from the regional district on funding, and then I'll go to Mr. O'Riordan on another question.
Our timeline is like, it's at present, like we're already operating off the side of desks and pressing, Dr. Jenny Horn and myself to move these things forward. We had put out so many proposals to try and get the curriculum development side of the house going for these projects, and we've just started receiving that information. Yes, we've got a hit, yes, we'll accept the funding, but now we need the coordinator. So we're in dire need right now.
The middle of the cart and the horse at the same time.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that, so that we can figure out what the next step to take. And I turn to Ms. Ferguson here and wonder, can we craft a resolution for Mr. O'Riordan to bring something directly to the board, our next board meeting in 2 weeks, or do we have to come back to committee and consider it and then recommend it to the board? Okay, so you've got a couple of weeks if we get a motion to proceed on this front. So I'll turn to Director Stone. What do you got, or what do you got for us?
I would move that we refer the, what's the title of the position? Request?
Agriculture
Coordinator. Okay. That we refer the funding request for the agricultural program coordinator for VIU to staff for a report back at our next committee of the whole meeting.
Seconded all around the room. Any discussion on that resolution? Staff have that clearly? Excellent. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Well, I want to thank you for attending today and using us as your guinea pigs in practice run. And I think you did an excellent job. And I'm not sure necessarily that we would need you present at the next meeting. I think Mr. O'Riordan can handle all the details, and we've got some history in this file going back a number of years, and look forward to seeing a report in a couple of weeks' time. So with that, thank you very much. Give our delegation a moment or two, and Amanda, next item on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next item is number 8, reports. And we have R1, reports from the Building Inspection and Bylaw Enforcement Division, fireworks discharge permits. Would you like me to read the motion?
Let's hear from Mr. McDonald first. Oh joy, oh joy.
Thank you,
Fireworks.
Mr. Chair. I've got a brief PowerPoint I could share with everybody. I see we do have some new directors from the last time I presented. So if it's your pleasure, would you like to see my short presentation?
We would love to see your presentation.
As it's coming up, I will just let everybody know this is a very old bylaw. This actually comes from 1970. It's bylaw number 39. It was adopted in July of 1970. Okay, as I was saying, I would do a quick refresher here, as we got some new faces here. And so this bylaw applies to all 9 electoral areas, as well as town of Lake Cowichan and Ladysmith. It excluded North Cowichan and City of Duncan. They all have their own bylaws too, by the way. All 4 of Lake Cowichan, Ladysmith, Duncan, and North Cowichan. So bylaw 39, it does prohibit the sale of fireworks. It's restricted to 3 dates throughout the year, January 1st, July 1st, and October 31st. Sometimes the one in July 1st will also get canceled due to fire restrictions. It does allow that special events could be approved by the board at any time, so there could be dates outside of those dates as well. And the other thing would be that you can't discharge within 500 meters of livestock. As for penalties, there's a $250 fine for having no permit and a $750 fine for the sales. Now the controversial part. So public opinion is very mixed. I have a large file that goes with this one. There's a lot of stuff in the newspaper, previous meetings that we've had. You can't read the Facebook thing that's on here, but I can tell you on that's 50-50, and that was from last April. So at Committee of the Whole on April 12th, there was a meeting right after an article ran the paper on the 21st, so I started seeing stuff on Facebook, so I started capturing to get a feel from what the public was doing. And it really is a 50-50 mix of people who really want it, and people say the CVRD has no fun and wants to get rid of it. So this is the other thing, is there's a lot of effect on animals. The cute little guy there is actually my own little dog who is actually terrified of fireworks. Back when I did my original report a year ago, the SPCA actually had already sent a submission, and it was a petition of over 14,000 names on this, wanting to see a ban of fireworks. And of all the complaints I received for fireworks, the bulk are to do with animals. And I've heard some pretty awful stories about some horses and different things. And even I think Director Martman can elaborate on some of those stories. And there is a resolution in front of you. And I'm here for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Look, Director Stone's got his hand up first. Anyone else like to pose any questions to Mr. McDonald? Go ahead, Director Stone.
First of all, I do want to just explain, the 4 municipalities do have bylaws, and they do supersede the regional district bylaw. I know our council is supportive of transitioning away from fireworks for celebrations. We're actually actively investigating drone shows and other opportunities for the future. But it is important to note that if a municipality has passed a bylaw for regulation of fireworks, it supersedes the regional district bylaw. At least that's the understanding we've received from our legal team. We can fight that out if we want, but and we are very mindful of the enforcement piece. I think it's unfair because I think it is much easier to regulate and enforce within tightly defined municipal boundaries, where it's easy to spot and track and show up at a location where an illegitimate or non-permitted use of fireworks is happening. And I live adjacent in the electoral area, and Director Martman knows every time the subject comes up, I talk about all of the discharge of fireworks around my house that's not enforced or maybe not complained about. But it is a problem, I know, especially for livestock and for pets. My dog is strangely oblivious to them, but many aren't, like your dog. So I am supportive of the regulation move and know that I can't speak for our other municipal partners, but that we're all actively looking to transition away. And our focus is more about maintaining and responsibly supporting the community events, but with that goal in mind of transitioning away from fireworks to other sort of celebratory public shows like drone light shows and what have you. So yeah, I do support the resolution. I'd move it, but I know that the other folks may have more to say.
Director Martman.
Well, I appreciate Director Stone's comment, and certainly, yes, coming from a rural area where there's a lot of livestock, it really does impact, to the point of we had a horse die because of a reaction to fireworks. I am interested in a couple questions, though. So the letters patent, and trying to understand how fireworks are somewhat differently, the approach to the process, I guess. It's not just, it's fireworks and a few other things are sort of dealt with specially, and can you explain the background to that?
Through the chair, I'll do my best to explain that. Letters patent was something before how bylaws, powers were given to local governments to establish their bylaw. Things have since changed, and I did write, there is a short blurb in the report on how we would change the letters patent and how we would apply to do that, to get it, so we have a service bylaw for this. But it doesn't, the actual letters patent doesn't affect the bylaw itself, it's just how it came into being. And I turn to Ms. Churl if she has something to add to that. I think I have it covered.
And I think the follow-up is more in the staff report, because, and I thought, as I think we heard from the public gallery earlier, that, it's about, it wasn't about the discharge, it was, I think I made a comment here, it's about the prohibiting the import and sales of fireworks and doing that across the region. Whereas I think we're talking about the discharge here. Yes, right. And so is there still, work that can be continued on across the region that would look at that and then take, all the different municipalities and the different First Nations and say, can we work on a regional approach to look at those two aspects of where, because the outcome is fireworks discharge.
Mr. McDonald, go ahead.
Interesting you would mention that. So I was actually double booked today, and this is just a workshop with Malahat First Nations, and so I have sent staff to it and to address, that was the number one topic we were going to address down there, was the sale of fireworks. So it's typically banned in all of the bylaws, with the exception of, I think, Town of Lake Cowichan does permit it in their bylaw, but it is basically permitted, or not permitted in any other bylaws. But where we ran into difficulty was north and south of the Cowichan Valley Regional District. You'll see on the side of the road for sale, so, and also through mail order is also very difficult. So there'd still be probably room to advocate to other levels of government to put an end to some of those kind of activities.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald, and I think we actually had a brief year or two where we had virtual complete compliance on the sales within our boundaries, and the anecdotal evidence was very positive. The number of discharge incidents that were reported were a lot less. A lot of the upset the animals and livestock were a lot less. But it didn't last very long, and we didn't have the jurisdictional reach to continue with that. So, anyone else? A third. Okay, Ms. Director Martman, go ahead.
And well, I guess this, I would speak in favor of this. The concern I have is just as of probably 4 nights ago, Easter weekend, and fireworks are going off on Woodley Range somewhere. And I guess it all comes back down to, we can make all these resolutions and pass them as a board level. Do you see any change in practice?
Mr. McDonald.
Through the chair. Actually, I do. I think it makes it easier once if it's an outright ban. Now, public awareness is another key component of this. So we are reactive in our bylaws, so this one I haven't even heard about, so that's one thing. If we don't hear about it, we don't know about it, we don't act on it. So that would help if the public also can point and say, give us evidence, say, well, it was my neighbor that did it. That helps us a lot. So I do think in a situation where there's an outright ban, that it would be easier.
Thank you for that. And just to touch very briefly on the enforcement issue, I know that the success that we've had in having people apply for permits has made a big difference to the RCMP, who are essentially the enforcement arm for this, but they look at it from a very different perspective. They're looking at safety and making sure people aren't getting hurt and injured as a result of fireworks discharge. We've got a little different perspective, and we've had very lengthy and impassioned discussions around these tables, and encouraged to hear what Director Stone and the town of Ladysmith is doing around alternatives. But at this point, I think it's a fairly well-written report, and I would look around to committee. I don't see any further hands, and Director Stone has just moved the recommended resolution, seconded by Director Staples. Would you please read the resolution? Oh, I got Director Acton. Let me get the resolution read, and then I'll go to you, Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The resolution is that it be recommended to the board that one, staff draft an amendment bylaw to the Cowichan Valley Regional District Bylaw Number 39, Fireworks Sale and Discharge Regulation Bylaw, 1970, to limit fireworks discharge permits to special events only and require board authorization for all fireworks discharge permits. 2, that staff draft a bylaw to convert the CVRD's Fireworks Regulations Service previously established by letters patent and to limit application of the bylaw to CVRD electoral areas.
Thank you, Ms. Ferguson. So, Director Acton, is your question for staff or a comment on the resolution on the floor?
It's a comment.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I will not be supporting this resolution. I think that we live in a very rural area, the whole Cowichan Valley, and we could just. I think we need to be leaders in this, and actually, we're kind of far behind when we have even large municipalities banning fireworks completely, and take the perspective of the animals and that as the most extreme. But it's also a very small population, less than 90,000 people, and we're going to have 10 different celebrations going on, 20 different illegal fireworks, all for just 90,000 people. I think it's totally unnecessary and so far behind in the times that I will be voting against this motion.
Thank you, Director Acton. Alternate Director Salmon.
Yeah, thank you. Just based on feedback I've had and have had when I was director, I have difficulty supporting this, but I did have a question for staff. Just Mr. McDonald, so that your last comment there, did I have this right? You said enforcement would be easier if there was an outright ban?
In my opinion, yes, it would. Only because if it's with an outright ban, none of it's legal unless it's a special event, which we would know about. And typically special events are something you'll see where there's a large gathering and it's well organized, similar to, I think, what City of Duncan does at the top of their building here, which is always well attended. So, and as Director Stone has mentioned, I think there's also an appetite to get away from fireworks and go to laser shows or drone shows.
Yeah, interesting. Though your recommendations are not there yet, but
trying to get there.
Okay, thank you.
I think there will be further discussion on these items. With that, we have a resolution on the floor. Director Douglas.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, as this would apply to the electoral areas only, I would want to defer to the preference of the electoral areas, since we have our own fireworks regulation bylaw, North Cowichan, and I've heard from, I think, 3 of the electoral area directors, 2 of which I think prefer option 2 as an outright prohibition. Is it, I know we don't do straw polls here, but is there some way to get a better sense of what the electoral areas prefer here in terms of the 3 different options?
Well, just thinking off the top of my head, I think that there's a voting requirement of the entire board because of the nature of the letters patent. So, oh yeah, get nodding over there. I think that it might be appropriate if we do have a resolution on the floor. It's been duly moved and seconded. I look to our esteemed parliamentarian and wonder if, and I think it's appropriate, for a referral to electoral area services along the veins of what Director Douglas has said. And then there could be a recommendation to the board that would contain the will of the electoral areas. So I would certainly, a resolution to refer is certainly in order at any time. And it looks like we've got it made by alternate Director Salmon, seconded by Director Wilson. Director Stone,
So this is a board motion being referred to EAS?
that's exactly what it is.
Okay. Because it would, okay, well, we can kick the can around a bit more, but yeah, okay. I just don't know how you'd, it's a vote that would require the whole board, but it's being referred to the EAS.
We've had a desire amongst the committee here to hear the will of the electoral area services only. And I suppose we could do a straw poll here, but.
No,
I think
that's
not
fine. I just didn't know if that would be appropriate, but if it is, then it is. That's fine.
Does it fly, Ms. Ferguson? She thinks it does. So we have a resolution to refer to electoral area services. Any discussion on the propriety of that referral motion? I think we've had it. Call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed? The motion carries. That was fun. Pardon me? Yes. R2, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. R2 is a report from the General Manager, Corporate Community Services Department, recreational funding, regional recreation governance and sub-regional commission membership.
And if we thought fireworks were fun, ha! Mr. Elzinga.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning to the committee. As we've discussed previously around the governance piece on regional recreation, we're doing this in bite-sized pieces. I'll use the analogy of the hockey rink. We started our own goal line. We made a couple of passes at the last meeting where we decided that we're going to do sub-regional commissions, and we decided that the membership of those sub-regional commissions would be based on 6% of usage. So we're now heading toward our own blue line, heading down the ice. We've got 2 or 3 other considerations, and we've got more in the future. So in future meetings, we'll discuss delegation of authority, committees versus commissions, et cetera. But today, for your consideration, is whether we should be discussing uneven amount of representation on commissions. In other words, do jurisdictions get more representation if they have more usage / more contribution? And also, should the commissions be made up of elected officials, appointed community members, or both? And then staff came up with the idea of First Nations representation on one of the commissions because there is an existing contribution by Cowichan tribes to the Cowichan Aquatic Center. So all of that is contained in the report. Mr. Chair, I'm available for any questions.
Well, I think Director Stone was the centerman on this one. He's lugging it out of his own end. And what do you got to say, Director Stone?
Can I just do a quick pass? Breakaway? Hockey analogies going around. Quick first pass. The question I had was, now, when we use the term commission, these are still advisory bodies to the board.
Mr. Chair, through to the Director Stone. Yes, they are advisory commissions, and so advisory commissions in our world have different powers and responsibilities. The board will be making ultimate decisions, so any recommendations like existing commissions come forward to the board for things like budgets or agreements.
Yeah.
But there are some policy decisions that are made at recreation facilities by commissions that do stay with commissions.
Okay. Follow up? And just on just a consideration is that some of these things like these sort of sub-regional commissions will not do away with some of the workload that comes with some of the existing committees. The Parks and Rec Committee in Ladysmith comes to mind because that workload, you're just removing FJCC out of it. Rarely is that the subject of those meetings. So it's just thoughtful for us to think about the level of engagement and participation that'll be necessary, because that commission essentially, or that advisory committee, will remain in place, and then on top of it will be this CVRD North Recreation Commission, at least in our area. But I am supportive of the staff recommendation. I was thinking about the inclusion of First Nations, which we do have in our Parks, Recreation, and Culture Advisory Committee. So that will remain. And I get the idea that Cowichan Tribes is a contributor, therefore they have representation on the commission. I would just like to have us find ways to include the First Nations throughout our region, participation and input into the work that we do if possible. But I do understand in this case it's framed as a financial contributor, so that makes sense. And I know that we can maintain Staminas engagement through our Parks, Rec, and Culture Advisory Committee at the town. So the confusion for us is we don't use the word commission unless they're endowed with powers. I understand these would be endowed with some powers, so it all makes sense. Thank you. I do support the recommendations.
Thank you, and I've got myself on the list just along the lines of what Director Stone was commenting on in regards to First Nations participation, and I did see, I think somewhere mentioned in the report I read it Sunday, an ex officio position in some circumstances. I'm hoping it was this report. And the second one, I just want you to comment, because you've been around here long enough to know that sometimes bigger and better and more causes issues around quorum and being able to effectively govern. It sounds better to have more, but then you sometimes run into getting all the folks in the room to be able to do the business that's before them. So, Mr. Elzinga?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to your first point, so I believe the reference that you saw was actually toward the Ladysmith Parks and Recreation Commission on that ex officio, or so it wasn't included with any of the existing CVRD commissions. So, and I take Director Stone's points that there are going to be additional responsibilities outside of these commissions in the realm of Parks and Recreation. As is written in the report, staff's number one priority was to make these manageable. And so we were looking at manageable numbers. So your point around bigger, not necessarily better, is well taken as well. And that led to the recommendation that's in the report.
Thank you. Director Martman?
Thank you. And I was wondering if there's any consideration been given to those that have less than 6%. In that, for example, the Cowichan Aquatic Center, I think there's 7 jurisdictions that are less than 6%. And so, but cumulatively, they're about 10%. About having their representation somehow be represented. So I don't know if you could speak to that.
Mr. Chair, through to Director Martman. So that's referring to the decision that was made at the last meeting that there would be a threshold of 6% for participation on a commission. So that would be revisiting that discussion around that. And anything is possible. So if you had some combination that exceeded 6%, staff can't speak to that on the fly, but that would be revisiting a previous decision. So it's not recommended by staff as we move forward, but we can certainly revisit if it's the will of the board.
Please proceed.
And so, yeah, I've been thinking about it since the last meeting and thinking about, how do you have representation, taxation and representation. And I think there may be opportunity in there to have a representative to reflect those users that are, of areas that are less than, the 6%. And I'm just wondering at some point that might be something to look at. It would add a member to some subcommittees.
Mr. Elzinga?
Mr. Chair, and just as a reminder to the committee that the next discussion will be around powers, responsibilities, delegated authority, and so that may be an opportunity for that discussion to say what powers reside with those appointees to commissions and what remains with the board, so that you do have that say.
And I'll just note, maybe a little different circumstance, but the energy required and the sort of diminishing return on that energy. I know that when the negotiations for participation with the Aquatic Center was happening with individual jurisdictions, some of us were really quite happy to just send the money and let the jurisdictions running the facilities to continue to run them and didn't really need to have input into them. So, and lastly, we all have that representation. We're the taxation, we're the representation around this board, and that will continue to rest with us. I looked over here for Director Stone.
Sorry, quick question. I've been reading stuff and I got thinking my thoughts. Has anybody moved the recommendations yet? Okay, so I'd like to move them, and then if I could get a seconder, I'll speak to them.
You have a seconder.
Thank you. So I think I feel some urgency, like we're talking about representation. This is in process of being implemented. The money's all flying around now, but we don't have these commissions stood up. So, but I actually really like Director Martman's idea, not to throw a curveball, but I wonder if, and I think this is what he might have been indicating, is that we look at how this unfolds and that we consider that idea of like, maybe there is a representative of areas D, E, and F, right? And that could be appointed, the three directors could get together and make an appointment to one of the sub-regional commissions where their collective, but again, something that we can look at and monitor in the implementation. But I do feel some urgency, back to that conversation about representation, decision-making to get this kind of established, because the money is already flowing. We're 1/3 of the way through implementing this funding program and this regional recreation program, and I'd like to see us get these commissions stood up and functioning. So after this, if we can get through this part today, we're going to talk about roles and responsibilities at our next discussion, and then hopefully we can get them meeting sometime in the not too distant future, because I think that's a really important part of this whole process, and we'll see that reflection back when we have folks feel like they're able to sort of represent their concerns, hopes, desires for the facilities that they're helping manage. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Stone. And I think that we also have to keep in mind, I'm not sure when our next survey of usage survey will be done, but that will probably create some interesting dynamics as to if certain numbers go up and certain numbers go down, there will need to be adjustments at that time as well. Is that correct, Mr. Elzinga?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll take both of those points on. So with the facility use study, the next one is slated for 2027. So we're doing it every 5 years. And we will be talking in the next budget year about starting to put some money aside for that potential survey. So nothing imminent in terms of changing the percentages. But back to the urgency around this. So in staff's opinion, the commission discussion could not have been accomplished prior to the adoption of the 2023 budget. And so with the 2023 budget, we worked with pre-referendum commissions and their makeup for the discussions around the budget. In my opinion, budget is one of the single biggest commission discussions. And so we are targeting the adoption of new commission bylaws in concert with the 2024 budget. So the committee has not seen, I haven't seen yet, the timeline coming from finance and any options around what the budget schedule or calendar will look like. But it is on my radar to have this in concert with the 2024 budget discussions, so that your new commissions will be making recommendations to you for your 2024 budget.
Thank you for that, Mr. Elzinga. I see no further hands. I see none on screen. I will call the question. Oh, have we had it read yet?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The recommendation is, the recommendation is one, that it be recommended to the board that option D in the Regional Recreation Governance Report of the Committee of the Whole meeting of April 12, 2023 be approved. 2, that it be recommended to the board that within option D in Regional Recreation Governance Report of the Committee of the Whole meeting of April 12, 2023, that A, the first representative from a jurisdiction be an elected official from the jurisdiction. B, The second representative from a jurisdiction be applicable, if applicable, be either an elected official or an appointed community member. 3, that staff report back to Committee of the Whole on the feasibility of Cowichan Tribe's membership on the Cowichan Core Recreation Commission. And that motion has been moved and seconded.
Director Acton?
Thank you. I feel better supporting this resolution if we had an understanding. So it sounds like it's kind of like a living thing at the moment. So understanding when this could come back, if it could be in the resolution.
Let's seek clarification from staff to see whether that's necessary. I think we're just sort of crossing the blue line right now. So, Mr. Elzinga?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through to Director Acton. So it's been staff's practice or intent to bring it to the Committee of the Whole for the first meeting of the month. It's potentially approved by the board in the second meeting of the month, and then we have the next discussion, the first meeting of the next month. Knowing, of course, that you don't have a May 24th committee or board meeting because of FCM, there's a slight interruption to that. So the intent right now is the next discussion, delegation of authority, powers and responsibilities, would be the first meeting in May, but if we can't get it together for that because you don't have a second meeting in May, it would be the first week of June, or first meeting in June.
Director Acton, follow-up.
Yes, thank you. And so also, once it's in practice, once we've come to a final decision and how it's all going to lay out, how we're going to advise ourselves, I'd like to have an understanding that, you know, this is kind of a trial thing that maybe is like a year long and then we revisit it. Is there a plan, or can that be included moving forward?
Mr. Elzinga?
Mr. Chair, through to the director, there is a planned review of the entire initiative in 5 years' time now. So that is on the books for staff to come back. But at any time, if the board directed staff to come back earlier, that's the board's prerogative.
Thank you for that, Mr. Elzinga. And I think that that's something that, given the participation in the commissions and committees, that we will likely have that opportunity if we hear pinch points and rubs that are a bit of a challenge. We can essentially change anything at any time. So that flexibility is there, Director Acton. Looking around the table, looking at the screen, I see no further hands. I will call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Elzinga.
Thank you.
Ms. Ferguson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have no unfinished business. We have no new business. And next is question period.
Now's the time for me to invite people up to the lectern to pose any questions to the chair, and I'll try my best to provide you with an answer.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Susan Kaufman from Satlam. With the referral of the fireworks bylaw to the ESC, I would just ask that the committee considers not only are animals affected by fireworks, but also people suffering from PTSD and other anxiety disorders. And would just like that to be part of the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kaufman. Duly noted. Directors sitting around the table or at home online, and we all heard you. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to pose a question to the chair of this committee? We have anyone online? No one online? With that, motion to adjourn, seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? We're